Good morning, everyone. Let the record show that we have a quorum present. So I'd like to call this public hearing of the Public Accounts Committee on the Office of the Auditor General, a report on the accounts of the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited, commonly known as the Turtle Farm, the order. And I need to apologize for one of my committee members, Miss Barbara, who is doing duties of filling in as a minister because the Minister of Finance is on leave. So at this time, I would invite the Deputy Sergeant at Arms to bring the witness in.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honorable Legislative Assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Timothy Adams. And first of all, let me apologize for the short delay in getting started. We need the government to do something about the traffic situation from us committee members that come from the east. But good morning, sir, and thank you for coming. As you will have been made aware, this morning we'll be dealing with the accounts and report on the Turtle Farm, well, what you call it now, the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited, and we will be dealing with the years 2017, 2018, and 2019, and we'll be reviewing your report and the accounts that accompany it. The only rule is that when you answer the first question, just state your full name and your title. That is for the Hansard record, so when people are reading the transcript, they can know why you was here and who you represented. So I guess the first question I would ask is, we're a little bit concerned that we're having to deal today with 16, 17, 18, and 19. There's some limited relief in the fact that we are dealing with 19, and I guess the first thing we need is some assurance that the 2020 accounts and reports are going to be audited and delivered within the statutory requirements.
Good morning. Timothy Adams, Chief Executive Officer, Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited. Mr. Chairman, in regard to 2020, I can report that the audit planning has already started. We have had a meeting on site actually with the auditors this week, and we anticipate 2020 will not have the same delays that we experienced in 2017, 2018, and 2019 accounts for the reasons which interfered with the 2017 accounts. being completed.
Could you detail what was the reason for the long delay for the 16, 17, and the 18 accounts?
The 16, 17 financial statements and audit was delayed by two main factors, and there was an anomaly in cash and there was an irregularity in procurement, and these have involved extensive investigations. The anomaly in cash has been investigated by the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and the anomaly in procurement has been investigated by the Anti-Corruption Commission. And the latter one, we understand there is a court date in January 2021. The cash anomaly, we understand, is now with the Director of Public Prosecutions. As we can see, given the length of time that these investigations have taken, they were very complex, and that had a knock-on effect on the complexity of the audit for 2016-17, which had to be completed before we could then move on to do 2018 and then subsequently 2019.
But certainly, even though those two events may have been material facts, you should have still have been able to produce the accounts with a footnote and have them audited, that there would have to be an adjustment down the road. It was a delay because you couldn't quantify it? Was it such that your records did not allow you to quickly quantify what the anomaly was in cash and what the problem was with procurement? Why did it take so long to investigate?
Because of the complexity, it did take that long to get the right figures. It involved an investigation that went back, in one case, to 2013, and to the best of my recollection, the other investigation went back as far as 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify from the audit perspective, I wanted to say that the 2016-17 financial statements were submitted on time by the Turtle Centre, so there was no delay in the submission. But as you'll appreciate, when through an audit you start picking up irregularities, the risk level goes up, the materiality level changes, and we needed to get to the end of particularly the procurement fraud before we could complete the audit, because of the impact on the financials of the amount of the value of goods that were in question. So just to clarify, it was very complex. It did involve quite a bit of forensic accounting, and we couldn't sign off on the audit until everything was clarified and we were clear about the value at stake. The cash was much more straightforward. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, today, Auditor General. In terms of the audit, the normal process is, I'm going from memory, is you look at the processes first, and then before you start getting it. In terms of the processes that you find as you were carrying out the audit, I mean, what lack of processes that pretty much alerted your team to where there's this weakness within the process that would have basically resulted in this fraud?
Oops. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. The Deputy Auditor General at the time was the person that oversaw the 2016-17, but I was heavily involved, but I'll look to colleagues if they can support. The cash was just detected through doing checks of the routine audit procedures on the accounts receivable and cash. And actually working that through, although as Mr. Adams said, it did go back a number of years, which obviously caused some concern about why it wasn't picked up before. but the really significant portion had happened in that 18-month period. And I think part of the issue, if I could say it, was the fact that we'd moved from a year to an 18-month period as a consequence of government changing its year end. And I think the person perpetuating that particular irregularity had probably just become more and more confident about what they were doing, and so it was escalating. On the other, I have to say, if you just looked at the statement of financial performance and you looked at one area of spend and you saw the variation year on year, you'd immediately say, that's really strange, why is that? Which is exactly what I did when I looked at the analytic. So from that, you then do your samples and you start to find things. And it also corresponded with a new chief operating officer coming into place who sort of quickly worked with us, and at the time it was KPMG that was supporting me as a subcontracted auditor, and that led to further work there. But again, that was a very, very complex investigation because of the nature of the fraud or alleged fraud.
Can you just confirm from your work if something as basic as the monthly bank reconciliation, if that was being done?
There were
Do you want to answer? I'll let Julie.
From what KPMG reported in 2016-17, there were bank reconciliations, but there were also errors that were noted there. There were not prepared with sufficient accuracy, is what KPMG came back with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the witness. Certainly, we want to thank the witness for being in attendance this morning and thanking him for his time. Outside of the financial irregularities that were noted by the Auditor General, which by the rules we need to stay clear of in this discussion, I think it is important likewise to recognize the tremendous strides in which the Cayman Islands Turtle Center has achieved in recent years. I think in 2018 it paid off its $50 million debt. In 2019 it paid off its remaining debt, making the organization debt-free. The Turtle Center has been improving its overdraft facility year on year by decreasing it by more than $1 million between 2017 and 2019. Annualized administrative expenses also decreased from 2016 to 2017 by 5.6 million, albeit it was up by almost 300,000 in 2018. Annualized revenue has been increasing in absolute terms since 2017. The majority of revenue, of course, has been derived from admissions, which have been contributing, I think, at a rate of 57 to 58%. First of all, congratulations to you, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Director and his team for managing the debt load. I think it speaks highly of the institution's credibility and that of its staff, and certainly the members of the public who are used to hearing of the various grants or financial assistance that is provided to Turtle Farm or Turtle Center year on year. This should be very positive, and I want to congratulate the Managing Director on this. The question, though, is with COVID having such a negative impact on all walks of life in the Cayman Islands, particularly in terms of government revenue, what is your forward-looking position, and how much impact, in your estimation, will COVID have on your overall cash position going forward?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the congratulations, and certainly it would be remiss of me not to say it's been a tremendous team effort. We have an excellent team of executives, an excellent team of managers and staff, and I would want to say that what we have achieved has been achieved together, and also together with very strong support from the government. the Turtle Center fulfills, or the Turtle Farm, I should say, as you say, I would rather say Turtle Center. I'd prefer if we use that word. I know some people listening remember it by the old name, but we prefer not to use it. But the Turtle Center really fulfills several important missions. And financial performance, of course, is one of the important elements of that. But supporting the tourism industry, providing a world-class attraction, and then introducing ecotourism events off-site are also important, and hopefully we'll get a moment to talk about those. But, looking at the other elements of what we do, educating visitors and residents, hosting the visitors that come to the island, and that part of it, of course, has now been interrupted by COVID, by the restrictions of COVID. Certain elements are still going on. The conservation work is still in full swing. As a matter of fact, today we're doing a release in conjunction with one of the schools of white-crowned pigeons. That is one of our captive breeding programs. And, we continue to sustain the culinary traditions of Cayman by providing the turtle meat products, as we do. And as we know, that is a very important conservation imperative in itself. Providing meaningful employment to, typically 100 or more local people. But getting to the COVID impact, when we examine the typical year, either one of these 3 years you look at, and you look at where our revenues derive from, and we find that typically we have only 10% or less of our guests or residents. And right now, that is what we're limited to in terms of the revenue in respect of the tourist attraction line of business. And when I say tourist attraction line of business, I cover admissions, retail, and food and beverage. And together they comprise typically close to 90% of what our revenues are.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
looking at year to date, Mr. Chairman.
We don't want to get too deeply into the 2020 accounts because they're yet to come.
Right.
So that's what COVID would only affect your 2020 accounts, not your 2019. But can you confirm that the only reason your debt is paid off is because government subsidized and paid off the debt, and that government, in each one of these years, government has had to highly subsidize the administrative and operation costs of the Turtle Center?
I would say that the ability for Cayman Turtle Center to have existed has depended upon the equity injections. And so in part it's debt.
The simple question is, was it revenue generated and management of the turtle farm that paid off the debt, or was it a government subsidy specifically to serve the debt plus subsidy of the operation expenses? In each of these 3 years we're dealing with.
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer to refer to the
No, prefer nothings or yes or no, because I can go and get the budget and show you the figures.
Yes, in terms of
Okay, then that's
in terms of if you look at a number and you compare it with the debt reduction, you can, you could attribute it to that. But
if so, are you suggesting that in 2018 the turtle farm could have paid down its debt, operated full operationally without any subsidy from government?
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is, even in 2020 and 2021, there's equity injection.
To get to that, when those accounts come up, because
yeah.
I have several questions concerning revenue, because one of my big concerns in all of your reporting and all the stuff that you say, the word revenue seems to be non-existent and what is being done to improve and generate revenue. But we'll get to those in specific questions. Right now, I think Mr. Chris has a question to ask you.
No. Yes, but if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to finish that off, the equity injections have also been reducing, if you look at it.
But that has been reducing as the debt reduced, not because you have generated revenue to cover operational costs.
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Sir, just expanding on something the member from Prospect said. We reduced annualized costs by 5.6 million, or did you mean to say 5.6%? the annual cost. You said 5.6 million.
Yeah.
And
Annualized expenses decreased from 2017 by 5.6 million to 2018, but increased by 300,000 or 6.3% in 2019.
so I don't want to think.
I know getting back to the discrepancies in 2017 and 2018, what was the reason it took so many years to discover it? Because you suggested earlier that had been going on from 2013, which would have been 3-4 years before. Are you suggesting that that kind of cash, whatever word we want to put on it, may have been going on in 2013, 14, 15, and 16? We didn't discover it until 16, 17?
Mr. Chairman, I'm somewhat constrained from what I can say about that because, as you know, it's, as I've mentioned.
No, okay. Well, let's deal with the processes
we
then.
can talk, yeah.
Did you have when were you appointed CEO?
I was appointed CEO in January 2010.
Okay, so you were here during 2013.
Yeah.
Can you confirm to the House that you had in place sufficient checks and balances that you should have discovered over that period of time cash discrepancies?
Chairman, I believe what I can say about it without crossing any lines that, as you know, I shouldn't, I'd refer back to what the Auditor General has said, in that there was a very significant impact of this during the 2016 to 2017 year. However, for the sake of thoroughness, we initiated forensic audits going back several years until we got to where we figured out it could have started. So, again, referring to what the deputy of the Auditor General mentioned, is that there were certain reconciliations being done, as he mentioned, as was reported, and suffice to say that since this discovery, substantial improvements have been made so that we avoid these sorts of things going on in the future.
But during that period of time, you had a chief financial officer?
Yes,
employed.
we had a chief financial officer.
Okay, and he was not required during that period of time to supply you and the board with regular reports, which would have brought this thing to surface.
I believe due to the nature of what was going on, the reports that would have been produced would not have revealed it. The reports that come to the board or to myself would not have revealed that. And indeed, as was mentioned, were not picked up even in audit at the time, which is why we initiated forensic audit to find out really all the full extent of it.
In your CFO, who I assume was a qualified accountant, board certified, etc., he didn't pick up, it was him that produced these inaccurate numbers, or was somebody else producing them and he was just signing off on them?
The anomaly that occurred was being done by a junior member of staff. And
But did
it went, shall I suffice it to say, it went undetected for that period of time until when the major impact of it occurred in 2016, 2017, and then it was detected.
and your CFO didn't have processes in place that he would have detected himself these substantial inaccuracies in the figures?
Mr. Chairman, I think, without, again, going into detail, which would be inappropriate because of the nature of these circumstances, what I can say is...
I'm not asking for the details,
obviously,
sir. I'm not asking for the detail.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for any numbers. I'm not asking for anybody's
Right.
name.
So,
All I'm asking is, you had a CFO employed, and he had not put in place checks and balances that would allow him to detect substantial inaccuracies between sales and actual cash being deposited and bank reconciliations.
we have found there were deficiencies in what was being performed in terms of reconciliations. Again, I don't want to go beyond...
No, but I don't. But again,
So yes,
I'm not an accountant, right?
So-
But if I have the responsibility to add stuff up, right, and somebody else added it up wrong, right, and I continue to add it up wrong myself, then there should be, from my point of view, as a layman, the CFO should have had the ability to detect those inaccuracies, and if it's because he didn't have, I don't know whether at point of sale he didn't have the proper reports that had to come to him. I mean, was he matching point of sale reports which you can get off your regular cash register with deposits, or none of that was being done? He was just accepting the inaccurate figures that were given to him from his lower staff.
I would say that it is obvious that there were processes that were inadequate within the finance department, and there were deficiencies in the reconciliation process, which led to this. So yes, the CFO and the people who report to the CFO would naturally have been a part of that not having been detected.
When you say it was a part of it, do you believe that he was part of the scheme that allowed this to happen?
No, otherwise there would have been quite a different discussion and a different outcome in terms of what has gone on with the investigations.
Right, and the
So-
CFO is not one of the former staff members that is in trouble.
No, that's what I'm saying, sir, is there has been thorough investigations of these things.
Uh-huh.
And
But
If-
how, if
there had
he
been-
if he didn't have the processes in place from which he should have been able to detect these inaccuracies, what investigation processes could you rely on to ensure us that he was not involved in the process?
not only in terms of what we were able to find out in the process of doing the audit, but also the investigations that were completed by the two entities involved in the two different issues have been very thorough, have involved inquiries that have involved various people, including the former CFO. So, sorry, I am somewhat constrained into how much more I can say about this because of not wanting to interfere with
Right.
with two
We'll
cases.
reserve the option to call you back after the court case
With
is
two
finished.
cases, yeah.
AG.
I just thought it might help if I clarified what I said before in response to Mr. Saunders' questions about cash reconciliations and whether they were being done in earlier years. I answered Julius answered, they were being done, but there were control deficiencies in those reconciliations and there were some issues found that were brought out as control points in previous years. So those control issues were there, and obviously through our audit opinions in those years, the CFO would have been aware of them, and one would have hoped they'd have been improved. So I just wanted to clarify that, but reiterate that the earlier year stuff was not material. It's the latter year, the latter period, this 18-month period where there was a real issue. Thank you.
It seems now from the 2019 report that you have moved from a CFO and you've introduced a COO, Chief Operating Officer, who now performs the role that the CFO previously performed. Was that a recommendation that you made to the board based on what came out of this investigation to improve the management aspect of it?
No, the change to Chief Operating Officer was an outcome of an extensive study that we did in conjunction with Deloitte, looking into the way we were organized, the salary scales, the reporting lines, reporting structure. So Chief Operating Officer position was put in place in order to improve how the company was organized, who reported to whom, and drawing together under the person who is responsible with the CFO role, but also responsible for human resources, for information technology, for the admin team, and for the finance team. So that was something that was in the works, separate and apart from these issues.
So the study performed by Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms here, made a recommendation to you and your board that you should eliminate the position of Chief Financial Officer?
Not eliminated, sir, but to change to where it would be titled Chief Operating Officer, and the person in that role is to be a qualified accountant to fulfill the role of CFO, but to incorporate within that role other functions as well. As I mentioned, HR is another important function of it, as well as IT, as well as admin. So you see, previously some of those reported either to me or to other executives within the company.
Given the history of the lack of performance of your financial control entity, you thought it was wise to give that person additional responsibilities, such as HR and IT and other things.
But actually, we did a recruitment for the COO. And in any case, the CFO that was in place at that time was leaving at the end of 2018 because of rollover.
But that's
So
not my question. The question is that you as Chief Operating Officer and the board accepted a recommendation that giving the person who, the position, Chief Financial Officer, additional duties to perform in addition to the financial officer would somehow improve the financial situation that has caused all the problem?
It would be incorrect for me to say that we were looking at the person, we were looking at the functions, you see? So that when we were examining how best to structure the company, we determined what the structure should be. And then we went to find who is the best person to fill that role. Some of the other roles changed as well in that restructuring. So I can't draw a clear connection between the board accepting and I accepting the new structure in relation to a particular individual.
No, I don't care who the individual is. I'm questioning about the function. My question is, did you as Chief Operating Officer and the board, having experienced some of this financial problems that you have, thought it was the best way to solve that problem and improve the financial accounting was to recruit a person who was a qualified accountant and give them additional complex things like HR and IT to manage along with managing the financials of the company?
So long as we found the right person that met the requirements of the job, and that's proven itself. It's really proven itself, because in addition to the role of, sorry, Chairman, I should correct, my title is Chief Executive Officer, and what we were recruiting was a Chief Operating Officer. So the Chief Operating Officer position, it wasn't the only change we made. We've also increased by adding an accounts officer within the finance department, because considering what went on and what would need to be done to avoid it happening again, needed an additional person at that level of accounts officer within the finance department to avoid the issues that contributed to what went on.
And that additional financial person is a qualified accountant who could take on the majority part of the Chief Financial Officer's role and sign off and produce accounts and all that.
No, that additional person will perform several of the functions that were deficient in terms of things like regular monthly bank reconciliations, for example, which are now being done, because now have the staff to do all those things, to do the reconciliations of cash from when the cash is closed at the end of each day, to check that those reconciliations are done. Quite a few business controls that are important to be done at that level, and that's a level of person that was added in addition to adding a Chief Operating Officer who has the qualifications of a Chief Financial Officer, and it's proven itself. It's working very well.
But no, you didn't answer the question. Is the person who's in that role a qualified accountant?
Yes.
Okay. And he's CPA or ACCA or AC?
CPA and CMA, to the best of my recollection, sir. The COO, the Chief Operating Officer.
I'm not asking a question about the Chief Operating Officer. I'm asking a question about the person who's doing the accounting now. Is that person a qualified accountant?
No, we have one qualified accounting professional, is a Chief Operating Officer, and then...
So, well, to answer the question, is the person who is now responsible for these reconciliations and bank balances, is that person a qualified accountant?
No, the person that does them, but there are checks done by those at higher levels with greater qualification. So you see, this work, a fair amount of it is clerical, but then it is backed up by documentation.
But
and so
what happened between 2013 and 2016? Where's the documentation there?
Well, from what we've learned, we've put in place what we need both in manpower and in terms of process.
The Chief Operating Officer also has qualifications in HR and IT.
Experience.
Such as?
Running very substantial organizations before she came to Cayman in Canada.
CEO or CEO or a CFO?
For a period of time, she even acted as CEO of, I believe, one of the airport's authorities, but I don't want to get into too much detail.
No, I don't.
Yeah, there was a number of roles that she filled that really fit her well for the Chief Operating Officer position that we created, which included roles that had, a broad experience beyond just financial accounting.
So the most important qualification going forward for the position of Chief Operating Officer will be a qualified accountant?
Certainly.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank Mr. Adam for coming on here today. I want to say off the record, I am a big supporter of Turtle Farm, and I also want to go on to say that I have absolutely no problem with the government subsidy. I've always taken the view, and this is my personal view, I'm not speaking for anyone else but myself, that when I look at Turtle Farms, roughly $10 million a year in subsidy, of which $6 million pretty much went towards debt and $4 million went towards the operation. When I look at the breakdown of that $4 million, roughly, you're talking about an organization that employs over 100 staff directly, mostly Caymanians, and another 400 or 500 staff indirectly, again, mostly Caymanians, and have over 200,000 visitors a year. So in a nutshell, for $4 million a year, which is the true subsidy, to get roughly 500-600 people employed, mostly Caymanians, and have a tourist attraction of over 200,000 visitors a year, I would think that's actually pretty good for $4 million. So from that standpoint, because if anything, if you do look at a lot of the visitors' complaints, is that we need more attractions. And if we can find more attractions that can have over 200,000 visitors a year and employ 500-600 people directly and indirectly, mostly Caymanians, I think I'm fine with it. The main thing from an oversight standpoint, Mr. Chairman, through you to the witness, is what it is that we can do, because I noticed between 2017 and 2019 annualized, the revenues went up by roughly 22%, which is also in line with the tourist arrivals. But I noticed that the average percentage from admissions has been around the 58% mark. So there seems to be as if though it is stuck at that 58%. And the question in all of that, Mr. Chairman, through you to the witness, is what can we do in terms of increasing admissions? I noticed in one of the annual reports, you had reported that there should have been a promotion with Cayman Airways that did not materialize. And I'm curious in terms of what can we do to actually increase the admissions to the Turtle Farm. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the support. Much appreciated. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would like to responding to that question, what can be done to increase admissions? I should put it in context that when you look at the typical market share of visitor arrivals, I believe it's around 14% of air arrivals that come to Turtle Center, stay over visitors, and about 10% of cruise visitors that come to Turtle Center. Yes, we believe that there are opportunities. There's some logistical issues, as I understand, with some of the programs we had in mind with Cayman Airways. I still think there's significant opportunities there once we resume tourism for awareness, for doing programs on board the flights that would build awareness of Cayman Turtle Center, would encourage guests to come there. And there are also affinities and various other revenue projects that we've done by teaming up, for example, with Tourism Attractions Board, with Pedro St. James and Botanic Park. And we actually have developed shore excursions that visit both Pedro St. James and Cayman Turtle Center, and others that we have launched, taking cruise visitors to Botanic Park. So We continue to develop in conjunction with other attractions. And when tourism resumes again, of course, we'll be back on the process of further enhancing those relationships. But yes, I think the relationship with Cayman Airways can be expanded even more. We now, for example, give a discount, or at least until tourism was interrupted, give a discounted admission to guests that present a Cayman Airways boarding pass. And I think that could be promoted more, perhaps promoted more in flight. There is advertising that we understand there's going to be advertising opportunities once a new aircraft are operational, and we're keen to have a part in that on Cayman Airways flights we're going to get the opportunity to advertise and promote to the visitors coming on those flights. We promote on the magazines that the other airlines carry to build brand awareness, and we also get opportunities for articles in those magazines. And we are now about to promote awareness of the Cayman Turtle Center to opportunities overseas, seeking even to have revenues not just from the tourist attraction line of business, but also potential for donations and sponsorships. We created a new website, caymanturtles.ky, caymanturtles.com. So those channels are now being developed in order to find ways to reach out to seek support for the mission that we have of conservation of sea turtles in particular and marine conservation in general.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the witness, just going back or expanding on my previous question, where admissions have been around 58% of revenues, which means then that other remaining 42% is pretty much the other stuff that you would sell, like from sales and so forth. Like, what initiatives are being taken in terms of to increase that size in terms of the wallet, or to get more? Because one of the things I'm looking at, and just this morning, ironically, I was listening to the I think there's an ad advertising. I think you guys have some Black Friday sale coming up. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm looking at with Turtle Farm is that you guys maintain a very high fixed cost base. So whether guests come or don't come, the bottom line is your salaries, which is your largest line, you still would have to pay. So whether they get one customer or 100 customers, your salary is pretty much the same. So in terms of trying to increase the non-admission revenue, especially now with no tourists, I mean, is it a situation where you go free entry and then hopefully maybe squeeze some of the prices up to kind of cover some of those costs? Because the main thing, like as I said before, for the $4 million subsidy, 500-600 people employed directly and indirectly, 200,000 visitors in an island where we have limited attractions, I really can't complain. But ultimately, that $4 million competes with other government priorities. So we would definitely like to see that number reduce. I mean, down to zero, even something positive. But in the interim, like those initiatives, like especially like now, to get people through the door, and then as most movies, they make it from concession stand as opposed to the actual film. Like, what initiatives are you guys looking at to really increase that size of the wallet or that part of the wallet?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question, to remember, because exactly right. When we look at the typical customer coming through the door in CI dollars, average revenue per guest is around, in round figures, around 15 CI for admission, around 5 CI for retail, typically somewhere around $3 for food and beverage. So in terms of initiatives that we have going on, we're looking to expand the retail activity for the local market. For example, we've had retail nights recently, which have been very successful. They're sale nights, and we combine those with food and beverage offerings in the courtyard. So guests come to the retail shop. It's open till 8 o'clock. The first one we did was on a Tuesday night that we had in October, and we had music and food and beverage in the courtyard along with the retail, very successful night. So we are going to have those nights again in November and December leading up to Christmas, as one example on the retail side, as well as food and beverage. And the other piece of that is we're looking to develop happy hours on Fridays. It's a beautiful setting, the courtyard, with music, drink, and something to eat. And that's something that we're developing, and we have launched that. Unfortunately, we had several Fridays with a lot of rain, but we would certainly invite all of the people who are in Cayman now that want to come out and have a lovely Friday evening. You know, we're having those Friday happy hours, and you'll see more of those promotions. In addition, we recently hired a head chef to develop the menu so that $3 average per guest, we aim to push that up by different menu offerings and also through events.
Mr. Chairman?
In terms of, just one question, and I'll yield to the member from Prospect. In terms of your long-term vision, I mean, ultimately, what it is that you would really want, like, what is it for you, the ultimate look of Turtle Farm is in terms of where would you like to see it go in the next 5 or 10 years, realistically?
We actually, in considering where we stood back in 2019, looking at 2020 and 2021, was to find various ways, as you have alluded to really significantly reduce the dependence on equity injection by developing offerings for the local market as well as for the tourist market, as well as reaching out for donations and sponsorships. Because entities such as ours, which are involved in conservation of turtles in other parts of the world, receive a tremendous amount of their revenues, or income, I should say, from donations and sponsorships. And so we've been developing that side of it as well, because we want to be renowned not only as a world-class tourist attraction, but as a world-class conservation entity, particularly involved in turtle conservation. And to the extent that we can increase the support for the Cayman Turtle Center through people coming to visit, through expanding the ecotourism opportunities and seeking potential revenue opportunities from that, and from, as I said, the donations and sponsorships, to gradually find ways to reduce that dependence on equity injection.
All right. Is there, in terms of the land spaces or the land usage that you have available, is there an excess land or extra land or surrounding lands that you guys have set aside for any future expansions, or they can be looked at? Because, I mean, I'm looking at like a Disney World concept where I noticed that they have all of these other future attractions. I mean, is there scope for growth, or is it we're limited to what it is that we have now?
There's a bit of scope in terms of developing and enhancing the facilities we have. For example, we had been considering how could we integrate a zip line experience into the Cayman Turtle Center. And each of these things, of course, have to be business case driven. And it's unfortunate what has happened this year, because we would naturally need to factor in what is the total number of visitors coming to the island, what market share can we attract, and of those, what market share could we get that would be interested in that experience, as one example, that would use the land that we have presently developed, but develop it with additional enhancements. The company does own a bit of extra land on the north side of the property. It's the way it connects in with the property, not necessarily the most amenable, and the shape of it not necessarily the most amenable for huge expansion. But as we develop opportunities to, for example, enhance our impact on other turtle populations other than green turtle, that in itself could become another attraction. We had been in discussions, for example, to have a coral propagation facility there, and that in itself, in addition to its conservation work, could have been an additional attraction we could add. But unfortunately, with the turn of events, that looks less certain now than we had hoped. So we consider that we will continue the development of various features, various attractions, and various enhancements, as well as reaching out on the conservation and ecotourism front, and thereby derive revenues that we don't have today.
One of the things I remember in yesteryears gone by, and I could be getting old, that turtle farm used to be profitable, turtle farm by itself. Then, of course, we look at overall expansion and everything else. Have your team done any analysis in terms of what the conservation part costs versus like what the attraction costs? Because I mean, ultimately, when you look at what you'd have added on, or in terms of expand it to what it is from where it was coming from, there'll be some additional costs. But under the conservation part of it, I mean, I don't think you sell enough meat to basically pay for what the actual true cost of conservation is. So in terms of even looking back at that 4 million roughly number, how much of it would you probably would say is related to the conservation part versus the attraction part? Have you guys done anything like that, or?
Yes, we did. We did that analysis, I think a year or two ago, and you're correct that the conservation part is a substantial amount. What actually is perhaps not well recognized is the production of turtle meat is also not a profitable venture when we take into account what it takes to produce and sell a pound of turtle meat, or turtle stew as you know it, monavolins or whatever, in the current scenario. Because in today's world, what was acceptable in the past, in years gone by, for things like tank stocking densities and various other features relating to animal welfare, we are now very careful to ensure that we are maintaining stocking densities that will pass inspection, which takes place now typically 3-4 times a year by the Department of Agriculture experts in those matters. So the production of turtle meat, and this, Chairman, may not be well understood, is not a profitable venture. It's done because of the conservation imperative, as I believe the member's alluding to. And the cost of that, best of my recollection, was more than $1 million out of that 4 million that we talk about needing to subsidize the company in its operations. And then the conservation part of it, best of my recollection, was a bit less than $1 million, but nevertheless substantial.
Another member from Prospect has one question, so Mr. Chairman, I will yield at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I want to thank the member from Boddentown West for exploring the revenue side of the column, and I thank the witness for identifying some areas that he believes the organization might increase its profitability. Page 4 of the Auditor General's report, though, spoke about some of the going concerns, which is what I want to address, the other side of that revenue equation. Mm-hmm. The Auditor General notes that historically the Cayman Islands Turtle Center has generated significant losses from operations and experienced cash flow difficulties. Whilst we accept, or when we accept, that 58% or more than half of your revenue comes from admissions, which we've also acknowledged will be negatively impacted in 2020 going forward as a result of COVID, what sort of cost-saving measures has the Turtle Center implemented to address the historical losses from operations? Creating new revenue is one option, but as you've identified, without people visiting the center, those new revenue streams are fundamentally, lack of a better word, useless. How are we saving in terms of expenses? How are we reducing expenses of the operation of the Turtle Center going forward, but also recognizing the challenges of the current era?
Thank you, Chairman, and through you, thank you to the member for that question. I'd need to refer, of course, to figures that are post the 2019 audited accounts, if I may. And to give some examples, and one prime example, the second biggest item of our operating expenses is electricity. It takes pumping a lot of water to do the various functions that we do. As I mentioned, for the welfare of the animals, there's a fair amount of flow rate that needs to be maintained, as well as to maintain the exhibits. We have a 1.3 million gallon system, the aquatic life support system, for example, that can have up to 20 pumps operating at a time. So in order to reduce electrical costs, looking at those elements has been the topic of quite a bit of work, particularly this year. We now have on board a professional engineer who has quite a bit of experience in various types of water systems. And year to date, October, we are approximately 19% lower in electricity costs year to date. And that is one example, if I may, of significant cost savings that we've been able to make. In terms of working through the COVID situation as a public authority, of which the crew members are all public servants, we have respected what has been the intention, not to lay off any staff, but in respect of saving costs, what we were able to do was we have a team of staff who are willing to do cross-departmental work. So we have teams, for example, from lifeguards that are now performing excellent service in aquatic life support systems. We have teams from tours that are filling in some of the security duties, and thereby we reduced the expense on security by some 29%. We have teams from various departments involved doing landscaping and doing janitorial work. And again, by having those teams doing that work, we've been able to significantly reduce our costs in those areas by having our crew members perform the work. We still have the staff costs, of course, but those are ways that we have been able to really tackle the issue of cost reduction in these times when the revenues are down. Revenues are down, you're talking about the going concern issue. Remember, we did have tourism for January and February this year. So the year-to-date figures I'm giving, of course, include those. But revenues are down year-to-date some 63%. Cost of sales are down as well, but our gross profit, or the figure for our loss, if you like, we are worse off by some 70%. But I'm giving you examples of how we're trying to minimize that by finding ways to reduce costs.
Was part of the staff cost reduction that staff had to use up their vacation during the COVID lockdown?
That wasn't a reduction, but what we what we did in terms of reduction, Chairman, was our crew members can work between 37.5 hours and 45 hours a week. And what we have done now is insist that it needs to be kept at the 37.5 hour mark rather than 40 or 45 hours a week. So that was one way that the reduction occurred. If you're referring to during the lockdown and crew members taking vacation, we provided for our crew members something like 7 different ways that they could earn hours so we could continue paying them through the normal payroll process. And one way was take your vacation or take your personal days. But of course,
wasn't it the government published policy that all of government entities would continue to pay their staff throughout the COVID lockdown without people having to consume their vacation? Why did you have to give them a option of taking their vacation during the COVID lockdown when government public and published policy was that all civil servants, whether in the government administration building or in the government-owned companies or in the public authorities, were to be paid their full salary?
Chairman, if that was a published policy that they were going to be paid regardless of whether they were performing useful functions or not,
to my recollection, there was no qualification by government that you had to be in office on-site working. All civil servants. Maybe the financial secretary can clarify if I'm making any errors here. But certainly was my understanding, and that was not a private policy, that was published in the press on several occasions, was that all civil servants, employees of public authorities and government-owned companies were to be paid without using their vacation in order to get paid.
Mr. Chairman, we'll look for the personnel circular and make it available to the committee later on today.
Okay, because that was my understanding, and I mean, we have had to provide funds and finance committee for companies like Cayman Airways and all that. Their people didn't have to come to work or find other jobs to do on the site. They were paid. Okay, well, let's move on. Note 7 of your 2019 accounts says that over time you have accumulated $437,716 in vehicles, and the final value of the vehicles as of the 31st of December 2019 is $100,000. Can you tell us how many vehicles the Turtle Farm own? Does it provide cars for staff, or what do these vehicles do?
Chairman, if I am reading the note 7 correctly, you're referring to note 7 on page 21 of the 2019. Yes. Right, so that because I wasn't I wanted to make sure that we weren't talking about having $366,000 worth of vehicles now, right? Okay. So what the vehicles? Correct. Correct. So, yeah. So what the vehicles are used for? We have vehicles used, for example, by the Buildings and Grounds team to collect materials and supplies. We have vehicles used in the conservation work when we're doing releases. Typically that involves mostly three vehicles usually, at least two vehicles that entails. The teams that does the production and sale of turtle meat, they have a vehicle that performs various functions that they need to fulfill. And, occasionally there's a need for a vehicle for executive use to either if a group of executives are going to a meeting or maybe we're hosting someone to collect them from their hotel, those sorts of things. But it's not a huge fleet of vehicles.
No.
It's,
What kind of vehicle was it that you bought for $74,999 in 2018?
I believe that was two vehicles, Chairman. I'm going from memory. I think one was a Ford F-150, another one was a Ford Explorer. So one's a F-150 pickup truck, and another one was a Ford Explorer, and they're used variously in those various functions I've just
Okay.
mentioned to you.
Your counts under your administrative expenses, administration and overheads would include salaries for staff, right?
Chairman, is there
Page 7 of the accounts. Statement of comprehensive loss. Under administrative expenses of both administration and overheads, that would include salaries.
Yes, I believe that would be the category under which salaries would be in that particular list.
Okay. It's a $300,000 increase in 2019 over 2018. Was this because some staff members got an increase in salary? Or was this additional staff that was added?
I can go back. Chairman, I would need to start back in 2018 and explain. And at the beginning of 2018, at the end of 2018, we made a transition to the new salary structure. And we also made a transition to a new salary scale that was evaluated by the consultancy of Deloitte, working in conjunction, of course, with the management and the team at Cayman Turtle Center. And that did find that in some areas, the salaries being paid were below what the comparables should have been, what this study showed. And so there was an adjustment that did result in an increase in salaries paid.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just intervene. Although on page 7, where you've got the $3,020,942, it doesn't reference a note, but if you and the Chief Executive want to go to note 19 on page 33, that gives you the breakdown of that $3 million, of which 1.5 million relates to personnel costs. It's just unfortunate the financial statements don't cross-reference to the note, and the note's on page 33.
Okay, Chairman, that's very helpful. If we look under the breakdown, we see that, for example, personnel expense.
Personnel expense in 2019 was $5,348,115. Why is it negative?
No,
Chairman, I believe that's because of cost.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
I'm not an
Chairman,
accountant, you know.
so
But that
sorry.
was what it cost, no?
No, I was actually, well, that's flagged on my
Okay.
thing to look at, because one of the things I noticed is that between 2018 and 2019, personal expenses went up 854,449, which is 19%. But the amount of actual staff only increased from 101 to 109. So I was also curious in terms of what was driving that.
So what was the, you said that the increase in personnel costs for 2019 was a result of the restructuring, right?
Partly, as well as some hires, additional hires.
Well, we just determined it was only 4.
Well, the thing about it is, one of the things, and Mr. Chairman, and we kind of jumped it, well, since we're on this topic,
Yeah.
I noticed the staff turnover is just below 20%, roughly for both 2018 and 2019. So the question is, as staff are leaving, because it did go up by 19%, and we do accept that, going to the public authorities law and doing all of the readjustments and everything else, that some staff salaries would increase, but or decrease. What I was curious about is looking at the staff turnover rate, which I think is like almost 18% for 2018 and maybe I think 19% for 2019, is that when those staff are leaving, are they being replaced by more expensive staff or are they being replaced by cheaper staff? Because the reason I'm asking that question is that if staff are leaving because, one, the question is why are staff leaving? Because 19% is quite high in terms of using a natural attrition rate of around 5 or 7%, for most companies. So this is above normal. And then second is, if they're leaving because of salary issues and then they're being replaced by people who are costing more, then, so I'm just trying to figure out what is driving the high staff turnover rate. And are there any exit interviews being done for us to determine why staff are leaving? Because 19% is actually quite high.
Chairman, yes, we have had, for example, in 2019, of the staff that left, 10 were terminated, 7 resigned, 2 were job abandonment, and 1 employee was made redundant. So that's what made up the mix in 2019. We have had cases where employees have resigned because they have found more attractive employment elsewhere. And that very often takes place at areas of the organizations, for example, in retail, in food and beverage, and occasionally with the lifeguards as well, because they are well trained, and becoming well trained makes them attractive for recruitment into other entities as well.
Sorry, you said, going back to the 10 termination, roughly, what is the leading cause for those 10 terminations down there in your organization?
And it varies, Chairman. There's issues of sometimes failure to perform, and occasionally there's issues of misconduct. And bear in mind, a lot of these positions are entry-level positions. And we are an anomaly in Cayman, for example, in food and beverage, where among that whole team we have, to my recollection, only 1 work permit. And among the retail team, there's no work permits. You know, and very similar throughout the organization. We have an organization where typically we have less than 5% of our people on work permits. Because they're entry-level positions, and because we're very determined that we're going to hire local people, there are times when in our recruitment we will give someone a benefit out and take them on, and very often works out to be an excellent employee. But we do have fairly rigorous systems of progressive discipline, because our aim is to ensure that the teams we have are good performing teams, and that they're not only performing their job well, but their conduct is what it ought to be.
The thing about it is, thank you very much for that, Mr. Adam. If you, based on your numbers of 19 staff leaving, and then your head count still went up by 8, which means that you brought on 27 staff, I mean, naturally I have to ask, in terms of getting staff in the door that quickly when so many organizations are struggling, I mean, what kind of like HR processes do you have in place to be able to replace staff so quickly? Because a lot of organizations struggle. So, I mean, you got rid of 19, you bring in 27. What's that recruitment process like? What's the vetting process like?
Well, these jobs are advertised, and they are the application is received by the HR department. The HR department will vet them, will create a list. The hiring manager, of course, will shortlist. There'll be interviews, and through that interview process, a decision is made for people higher up the levels of the organization. There's a secondary step where we will ask them to perform something related to what that job is, and then evaluate how they perform on that job. So it is a process that's commensurate with the level of the organization, within the level of the organization.
Okay, so with most of these positions being entry-level job, then I would assume in terms of the training and development at that level would be quite small, because one of the things I was curious about looking at the numbers is if you have that high turnover and people coming in, then naturally the training costs or getting people up to speed, that cost would actually also go up. Now, we don't have the breakdown of that here, but in terms of the training, or how does that impact training or development in terms of what you're spending in staff in that regards? Because, I mean, you spend money to bring someone on, then all of a sudden that person leaves and the next one comes on. I mean, that's more cost again. So in terms of like year on year, how does that impact your cost structure?
There is training costs involved, and obviously turnover it's not something that we aim to keep high, but we remain determined to give good, meaningful job opportunities, and we're determined to keep that as much as we can among local people, and that to the extent to which we continue to develop our HR practices, we continue to develop our people management practices, we maintain good disciplinary processes. We're aiming at all times to minimize that. We have a philosophy within the company that the purpose of discipline is to teach, because we're aiming to minimize the number of times, like in this case, those 10 out of 20 being due to termination. That's something we aim to keep much lower than that. But rather, because we have so many local people among our staff, they become targets for recruitment by other firms who are looking to recruit good local people. And it's a perennial challenge, Chairman, to hold on to good people and to attract good people, but we continue to do it. We have a great team.
Mr. Chairman, through you, do you feel comfortable that your management crew understands the Caymanian culture, local culture, how to deal with local people, how to talk with local people, that's working under them? You feel comfortable with them?
Chairman, given that among the management team, excuse me, that have people reporting to them, out of those 4 work permits I told you about, 2 of those are veterinarians. So out of all the management team, the only people who are not local people, Chairman, are 2. And in their case, you know, they have been here for a number of years, and each individual manager has their own style and has their own way of expressing themselves. But for me to say that I think there's a misunderstanding of local culture, I can't say that I would agree that that is the issue or that is an issue.
Mr. Chairman, through you, at the end of that, I left the culture and I said on how to talk to the staff below them, how to deal with the staff below them, because respect begets respect. Do you feel comfortable that those 2 that are not in the veterinarian section understand how to talk to the type of people that you all are bringing in, like you said at the bottom end?
Chairman, I would say that I believe all of our management team do a good job of talking to local people. But what I would say is that different managers have a different style. And we continue to coach and develop, and where we detect issues as could arise in this regard, we aim to coach and talk to them about it. So I am not going to claim perfection in that regard. For any of the managers, any of us can fall prey to a moment when we don't speak correctly to our team members. But we do ensure that we are going to see the way through with training and coaching and speaking to any of our managers who may have a problem with this.
Mr. White?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I have 3 questions I would like to ask the CEO, but before that, I would just like to say that our family grew up in a time when the turtle farm, I know you don't like the 4-letter word, the F word, but we grew up as Turtle Farm, but it's a turtle center. We grew up when that was the main, in fact, the only tourism attraction. So I would love to feel that the Turtle Center is here to stay, and I'm extremely proud to be the Council of Tourism and has some dealings with the Turtle Center. And the 3 questions I would really like to ask is, and we're dealing with the annual reports, 3 years annual reports, and in the 31st of December 2019. So in consideration of that, I would like to ask, over the last 3 years, how has the Cayman Turtle Center performed financially? That's one of the questions. And then also, I would also like to ask, has the Cayman Turtle Center really made a difference in the conservation of turtles? And has the Cayman Turtle Center made any plans for ecotourism? So you can answer that how you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of conservation results, we have seen through the years the evidence of that by the number of green turtles nesting in Cayman and the huge increase since turtle nesting records were kept in Grand Cayman beginning back around, I think it was 1990 99 or earlier than that, over the years, you see that result, and we can tell that something is certainly working to preserve the number of sea turtles around our islands. Something must have been done. But what was even more telling was a study done and finally published last year in conjunction with the University of Barcelona and the University of Exeter and led by the Department of Environment here, that showed through the genetic proof that some 90% of the nesting green turtles in Cayman are directly genetically related to our turtles at Cayman Turtle Center. In other words, a result of the release program. We also saw through that study the impact of the turtle meat production, and various data were derived from a socioeconomic study that was a part of that. And there was a part of it where the study was what percentage of the people who consume turtle are consuming farmed turtle meat versus those using wild turtle meat. And the percentage using wild turtle meat was very low. Sorry? It was, Chairman, it wasn't us doing the study. This was done by a professional and over quite an extended period of time with a number of different interviewers. But the ones that, what was very telling from that was the ones who said, yes, they only use the legal turtle meat. They asked them, well, if there wasn't a source of the legal turtle meat, would they then consume illegal turtle meat? And it was something like 46.8% or thereabouts that said, yes, they would. They would consume illegal turtle meat if they couldn't get illegal turtle meat. So the challenge you have there is we need to keep producing turtle meat, because if not, even if only half of those people decide they're going to consume illegal turtle meat, the stock of turtles in the wild around Cayman is not yet at anywhere near the level that can sustain that. You would lose the population of turtle. In terms of ecotourism, we have engaged in developing a number of initiatives that I believe have been.
I think you gave us those already.
Well,
yeah.
About ecotourism, what I wanted to speak about, Chairman, was to answer the question, if I may, was we do Head Start turtle releases. Like in 2019, we did 78 of those. 8 of those in Cayman Brac. So we also incorporated sister islands in some of these programs. We do hatching releases from beaches. We had 24 release events, and each of these are an ecotourism event, those hatching releases. And in that, over 376 hatchlings released from beaches. And then we do the egg translocations in the last about 3 or 4 years. We started doing that. And that has been an excellent ecotourism initiative, which attracts a lot of tourists as well as residents. What's more important, each of those ecotourism events is also an educational event, because we educate people, we talk to them about not only the conservation of turtles, but how turtles are a keystone species. And if we conserve turtles, if we do the thing it takes to save turtles, we will save all of the marine environment, because turtles use the beach, they use the shallow water, they use the deep water. So if that suffices, Chairman. Chairman, I would like, if I may, to circle back to talk a bit more, because the member previously asked what sounded like a concern about relations between managers and staff. Chairman, may I speak a bit more about that?
Yeah, you're the person to determine what the answers are.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I want to come back to another question, so he'll get a chance. I want you, we here, sir, want you to answer some questions.
Yeah.
How many work permits do you say you have?
To my knowledge, there's presently 4.
One of those is top management, correct?
One is an executive and one
That
is
holds both the CEO and the CFO job. One person that's on work permit holds those two positions. Am I correct, or am I just...
No, that's correct.
What is being done? There's a lot of well-qualified Caymanians. I remember sitting over there and looking across and making a remark on one person who's no, you can't comment on because it's in court. Now, I'm going to ask you again, what is being done about replacing this person, because there are a whole lot of Caymanians out there, well qualified, wanting jobs, and they will know how to talk and deal with people in a respectable manner. What is being done about that? Is there any succession planning? That's all I want. And that for that particular post where the work permit is.
Mm-hmm. Chairman, as with any posts that have a work permit, we run the recruitment, we run the advertisements, we look for the people that have the right qualifications and the right experience, and that is something that's repeated every occasion when we're applying for a work permit. We have a robust recruitment, as we talked about a little earlier, and it's no less robust when it comes to recruitment of an executive on a work permit.
So we should see in that post advertised before February when it's up then. Should be advertised any time now.
Whenever the permit is up, I don't keep
Yes,
in my
February.
head. Chairman, I can't confirm or deny that. I don't know exactly the month or the year of the permit coming up. But what I can say is that, of course, we are going to do a recruitment and we're looking for the right caliber of person that wants that job. And if I want
and
to...
the qualifications for that job, as I recall, is CFO, experience in HR, and experience in IT.
And admin.
Or qualifications in all three of those things.
Chairman, what we would be looking for is somebody to fully fulfill the role. So yes, the full professional qualification as an accountant, and then experience in management at a high level, involving human resources, involving administration, involving information technology,
Okay.
and involving finance, of course, running a finance department.
Okay.
So that's, but I did want to come back to, Chairman, if I may, it sounds
Yeah.
like there's a concern about relations between staff and people at various levels of management. And what I would want to assure you, Chairman, is that within the company, we have implemented a conflict resolution process so that any member of our group, at whatever level, that has a conflict, there's a clear-cut method by which they can take the steps to raise that conflict through the proper process, up to and including to me. So if there's any crew member that is aggrieved or has a conflict about how they've been spoken to, we have a process and it works. And and our crew members are encouraged to use it. So that is if you like, a safeguard if there are issues in that regard.
Okay.
Because as I said, I'm not claiming we're perfect,
Yeah.
but I will tell you that we are determined to do it well.
Okay. I want to get back to the $804,000 increase in personnel costs between 2018 and 2019. You said it was a result of the restructuring, right? How much more are you paying the COO than what you were paying the CFO?
Chairman, I would need to look at the salary ranges.
Okay, but it would be more because you got additional duties. I mean, you can't get
the CO is in a higher
position.
salary range than the CFO would have been, correct.
Okay. And this restructuring was as a result of a consultancy with Deloitte.
That is correct.
Okay. When you got the consultancy, was the implementation approved by the board and done in accordance with the public authorities law, i.e., you got specific cabinet approval for those increases.
Okay. Perhaps I should speak first to how we did the Deloitte consultancy and then speak to how do we come in compliance with public authorities law. That may be, if I could break it down in those two. So the Deloitte consultancy was something that the board realized we needed to conduct a salary survey because there were concerns that perhaps our ranges were no longer reflective of the ranges that are appropriate within the Cayman employment context. In pursuing the RFP for that, getting in various bids and examining the bids, the chosen vendor, chosen bidder, being Deloitte, had proposed that actually doing just a salary study alone would not really fulfill what they understood the intent was to achieve, which entailed looking at the structure as well, as I mentioned, right? The board was very much involved in the initiation of that. The board was involved in the final, approving the final documentation of it, the final report, and the board was involved in establishing what the salary ranges should be based on the result of that study. In respect of compliance with public authorities law, there's an exercise that is being conducted, and as I understand it, now it is down to the larger SAGCs in which a consultant has been appointed to best determine how to map our jobs into the civil service salary scale because a declaration has been made
but that's not what, that's to come.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this structural adjustment, right? Which the public authorities law would have been in place when this was done. This structural adjustment recommended by Deloitte was approved by the board and done in accordance with the public authorities law, which was in place at the time.
Chairman, I would say definitely was done in accordance with the board and the board's approval. And I believe there are elements of the public authorities law that was recognized would come into place.
No, they were all in place when this in 2019. I can assure you that because I
So
followed it.
you're asked, the particular section I believe referring to is, did we give an across-the-board raise? Because that then would require, as I understand, a cabinet approval.
No, I think any increase in any positions under the public authorities law, and particularly where this seems to be largely concentrated at the top in terms of restructuring the management structure based on Deloitte recommendations, right, would have been at the top level jobs. So you're saying that, in your view, that would not have required compliance with the public authorities law?
To the extent that the exercise had not been completed and still hadn't been completed, that will map our jobs.
No, but
into,
let's not be, I don't want to get two, three things from going. So the exercise of awarding increases salaries and restructuring as recommended by Deloitte in 2017, 2018 has not yet been fully implemented?
No, that was implemented, but it wasn't across-the-board raises. They were individual raises. And as I understand it, individual raises are a matter for the entity itself.
I don't think so, but anyway.
I could be wrong, but
Well,
Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is there a specific HR, person in charge of HR, or is the COO, CFO got this as well?
The human resources manager reports to the chief operating officer, and the human resources manager has a position that reports to them, the human resources administrator, for which our recruitment is being done now because the person previous in post left. So,
Okay.
so there is a structure for HR, Chairman, to answer that deals with the HR matters.
So who handles conflict within, how's the conflict process? Who handles conflict within the organization?
The conflict resolution process we have in place takes place at each level of the organization. So, for example, if there's a conflict between two, let's call them line staff, and they don't resolve it between themselves, the aggrieved member, whoever that is, brings it to the next level up the organization to get it resolved. If there's a conflict involving a member of staff and and somebody who is in a higher position within the organization, and they can't resolve it between themselves, because that's the first step, is we encourage if there's a conflict between two individuals, whatever it is, whoever's aggrieved should express what they're aggrieved to the person that aggrieved them. And if that doesn't work, then they both need to come to the next level up. So it's throughout the organization. It's not, if we were to say there's only one point of conflict resolution, that would be incorrect.
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, just trying to understand the governance structure and expanding on what the chairman was asking earlier. With regards to the Deloitte study, originally you said Deloitte was brought in to do a salary survey, but I'm trying to figure out when did the decision arrived at with regards to doing away with the CFO position or merging it into a COO position. I'm just trying to understand the backdrop. Was that a Deloitte recommendation, or was that, or what did the term of reference add in terms of the engagement for Deloitte in terms of what it was that they ultimately wanted? Was that a separate decision that was made with regards to doing a COO role, or that was a Deloitte recommendation?
Chairman, yes, it was a recommendation of the Deloitte consultancy that we needed to rationalize things like spans of control and so on. And there were a number of positions that were reporting directly to the CEO. For example, he used to be a chief human resources officer, and various things like that part of admin reported to the CEO, and as well as several other executives. That was just one example where there was a change made and the reporting structure changed. There was another example in another executive level where many different things reported to the one executive, and it was divided out. And now we have, for example, a chief marketing and merchandising officer, right? And to whom reports the marketing, the retail, and the food and beverage. We now have a chief tours and customer experience officer, as customer service and lifeguards and tours report to them. And lifeguards, for example, used to report into a whole different entity, the chief infrastructure officer. Many different changes that were made, and good rationalization was made to create an organization that runs better, and it does.
No, the reason I'm asking that question, Mr. Chairman, through you, and I just want to understand this because I find it very hard to believe that Deloitte, and it's possible, I'm not saying it's not, a company of accountants is going to basically go and make a CFO role literally not there. And the reason being is that one of the things that came out of the old Sarbanes-Oxley going back to the days of Enron back in the early 2000s was the importance role of a CFO, because outside of the normal operating role, one of the primary functions of the CFO is to safeguard the interests of the shareholders. And that has always been something separate, because the CFO is in essence the corporate snitch on management and management decisions. So in doing away with that role and incorporating it into an operational role where a person is making operational decisions, you have lost your corporate snitch the shareholders in this case, or the one shareholder, the government, has lost their corporate snitch, who in essence doesn't normally get too much into the day-to-day decisions or management decisions, but report on whether those decisions make sense or don't make sense. And what for ease of reference, would it be possible to provide this committee with the copy of the Deloitte report? Because I'll be curious to see how that governance come around. I'm not saying that there's not a need for a COO. I believe an organization of this size with the complexity does require a chief operating officer. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. At a minimum, I would have been expecting a chief financial officer, a chief operating officer, and a chief executive officer. But the loss of that corporate snitch to look out for the shareholders is of grave concern to me, and I'll be curious, and that's one of the things I would really like to take up with the board to understand. Because one of the things with both boards, to make them function effectively, is that they normally would have these subcommittees. So you have an HR subcommittee, which in essence would consist of your chief human resource person. You'll have a finance subcommittee that will also have your chief financial officer. And the reason you have these subcommittees is that it gives senior management an opportunity to interact directly with the board outside of other senior managers, to be pretty much forthright and straightforward with them. So I'm just trying to understand the overall governance structure. And then seeing the challenges that we had with Turtle Center with regards to the internal controls and everything else, naturally the governance would be a big part of us. So I think, overall, as I said before, I think the support of Turtle Farm, and I speak for most members of this House, I think is marrow deep, because it is something I think that provides a very vital function to our country as a whole. But ultimately, one of the things that we need to make sure of is the governance and also the efficiency of that organization, which is what we're trying to determine here today. So, I'm not going to ask you to get into the Deloitte stuff, because that would have been years back, but just to kind of provide us with a copy of it, so that way we can, I guess, kind of get a better understanding of where Deloitte Headspace was with regards to making that recommendation. But I find it very, unusual for accountants to make an accountant position redundant, or from that standpoint. Thanks.
Chairman, if I may respond, it might help illuminate some of this. The decision and the recommendations that were made by Deloitte bore in mind that we also needed to keep efficiencies and cost efficiencies within the company. And I'll give you another example. And whereas normally we used to talk about a chief financial officer, chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, and so on and so forth, that's where the decision was taken to combine certain functions and certain roles. And so that's where the decision was taken, for example, as I mentioned, chief marketing and merchandising officer. So we don't have a separate CMO, but the CMO is a very important role. But included under that and given responsibility, additional responsibility to that individual, is also retail and food and beverage. Likewise, what occurred with the CFO. So what I would say is that I don't want to leave any impression that the chief operating officer role and its functions as incorporating the chief financial officer was in any way diminished. In fact, it was enhanced, upgraded, and has an even a more extensive impact in terms of its impact on the company, and in terms of its in enhancing governance of the company and enhancing the ability to perform these financial reporting.
Okay.
No.
Can you send a copy of
Mr.
the report by your
Deloitte.
CEO this afternoon, please, of the Deloitte consultancy report?
Deloitte consultancy report.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. I can understand the rationalization for sales, marketing, retail, and all of that. But in terms of overall governance, like I said, going back to the CFO role of being that corporate snitch, is that you, sorry, 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. Going back to the overall governance, is that the CFO has always been the one independent role of management that directly deals with this, because they're outside of a lot of the decision-making process, but more on the analytics and everything else. They have always been that independent voice. And so in terms of losing that independent voice and increasing governance, I can't see how this is possible when the chief operating officer, which is also by nature a position that deals specifically on strategic direction or strategic implementation and works very closely with the CEO, because of those two positions, the CEO and the CEO and COO would work very closely together, and the CFO is the one who basically snitches them out. So what you have now is the CEO and the COO working together, and the snitch, the CFO role, is now incorporated in the COO role. And that role has traditionally been the one person that looks at the actions or inactions more of the CFO, so of the COO and the CEO. So, and that's why I'm just trying to understand, because as it stands right now, the corporate snitch that we, as the ultimate, the members of this house and the government, in terms of being the shareholder of Turtle Farm, we have lost the snitch for both the CEO and the COO, and we need to understand where our corporate snitch is now. We need to know where that person is, because ultimately, that's the position that we would have called here today separately, that would have said, well, these were decisions that were made by the CEO and the COO, and this was my opinion or this was my disagreement with it. Just as in the House committee, in this committee example, the committee can prepare a majority report, but there's also the possibility for a minority report. And that dissenting voice, which is normally from the CFO, is something that is missing from the governance of the Turtle Center. And that is something we need to understand now, how that is going to work. But ultimately, that is more something that the board should have been concerned about, not something for the CEO. And so, we, like I said, going back to what the chairman has said, we just be curious to see what the Deloitte recommendation for that one was.
I missed a question way back when. There were two problems in the 2016, 17, 18 accounts. One was cash and accounting thereof. Another one was some procurement stuff, right? In those procurement, who made the final decision? Who signed off on those procurement decisions? Was it the CFO or yourself, the CEO, or the board? What are your break off positions? In other words, a department head can make a procurement on $1,000 on up to authority limits. And who would have signed off on these complicated procurement stuff that went on?
Chairman, again, I am being cautious as to what I say because of this, but they.
Phrase the question. In your organization, what are your authority limits for procurement and who signs off on each one?
Okay. What we presently have is a situation in which, back in 2019, or let me say this, and hopefully this is helpful. Back in 2019, a manager could have raised a purchase order up to a certain level, and that I don't have that number in front of me, but it was a fairly low level, but it was enough that could accumulate to a substantial amount if you did various procurements over time. And that was how it was done then. Now there's certain divisions of responsibilities.
In 2019, your manager signed off on all procurement. There were no limits that promoted certain things requiring greater authority signature, like a CFO or CEO or board approval.
For example, where the limit required three bids to get 3 local quotes, the manager could do that, and the manager could.
Right, but what's the quantum? What I'm looking for is, normally when we bring people like yourself into this, they can tell us, well, a manager can sign off on $10,000, even though he's required to get 3 courts. The CFO has to sign off on $100,000. The CEO is necessary for $250,000, and the board is responsible for anything about that. None of that existed in 2019.
Yes, Chairman, it did.
I want to find out
Yeah.
what was it in 2019.
Yeah, let me, if you give me a moment, I will, I need to refer. Okay. Chairman, I will need to refer back. The document I have, unfortunately, it would be post that date, post the date of this issue.
Not a problem.
Because we
You
want
can,
to go, we want to go back to,
you
we
can
want to
send
go back
it-
to what
right.
existed then, and I
Okay.
want to
I'll
give you the
ask.
right number.
Okay, you can send it by the
Yeah.
COO this afternoon when she
Sure.
comes at 2 o'clock. Okay, not a problem.
I have some other questions, Mr. Chairman, but there's some other stuff I need to get first, so can we reserve the right, if needs be, to? Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Adams, thank you very much for your time, sir, and we reserve the right to call you back depending on what other witnesses say. Okay?
Thank you, Chairman,
Okay, thank you very much.
and thank you to the committee.
Bye.
Thank you.
The committee is adjourned until 2 p.m.